puzzle pieces. Can you hear me? It seems like it's far away. Now? Okay, cool, thanks. Okay, so thank you for coming. I'm Angelo Papastamas. I run our TravelWise program. I work in transportation planning. We have with us Kim Clark with VIA, Caitlin Barklow with UDOT, and Justin Smart with Pinna Power. We're all going to be talking, hopefully putting together the integrated transportation pieces for you. We're going to start off with some polling, okay, and I'm going to let Justin take over on the polling, and you guys get to actively participate. So if you have a smartphone, it would be out and available, and you can participate.
Excellent. Thank you, Angelo. So this is a question. In fact, I was just talking with somebody down in the exhibitor area. They said, so you're presenting? And I said, yeah, we're presenting on integrated transportation. And he goes, what is that? So it was like a great little anecdote that I could share with everybody. That's kind of one of our purposes today, is to try to answer that question. But we wanted to give everybody an opportunity to help us right at the outset. And so throughout this presentation, we've built in some opportunities for you to interact with the presentation itself and give us some of your feedback on what you think about some of these questions. So to get us started off, and I'll put the question up and then I'll kind of explain to you how this is going to work. So if you've got a smartphone, an iPad, I'm a roamer, so I'm going to try to just stay here. I'll hold on to this. If you have a smartphone, a dumb phone, an iPad, any device at all, you can interact with this. Okay, so there's two ways. Number one, if you have a browser-capable device, if you go to that polev.com/udot, you'll be on this session, and then it will track along with each of the poll slides that we have throughout. So it'll auto-advance. You don't need to worry about it. Next time you look down at your phone, it'll be the next question. You can answer. Most of these questions you're only going to be able to answer once, so think about it, and don't have fat fingers, just because we want to know exactly what you think, not what you didn't mean to say. The other thing that you can do is if you don't have a smartphone and just want to text, or if you just prefer to text, you just text UDOT to that number, 22333, and you'll be in this session. So you don't need to continue to text UDOT to that number. You'll be in, and then at each slide, you'll just have a number to text back, and it'll register your vote. So that's how the slides will work throughout. On this particular one, you can text in a word, just one word. We do have filtering turned on, but we're not moderating it, so we can't stop you, so keep it clean. But what we want you to do is, when you hear the term integrated transportation, what word comes to mind? Or what words come to mind? This is one that you can text as many times as you want. Just keep sending in words, and it'll build us a little word cloud here as we go. So, okay, good. You guys got this. I love it. Trails, incorporating, transit, communication, bikes, balance. Well, you guys are good. Transit is obviously a little bit more popular response so far. We've got TravelWise up there. Man, you're testing my ability to read on the fly. Collaboration, connected, PEDS, balance, balanced, complete, lots. Ah, this is great. I'm just giving you a minute, and I'm trying to take a minute. This is really cool. Diverse, mode balance, efficient, compromises. You keep working, keep moving. Awesome. So I think this group has a pretty good sense of what integrated transportation means, because there's a lot of stuff up there, and it's pretty well on target, and you kept it clean. So what more can we really ask for as a TravelWise team or as an integrated transportation team? So we're going to keep moving, but suffice it to say that we recognize as your presenters today that integrated transportation is big. It encompasses a lot of things. We're going to talk about 4 primary components of integrated transportation as we move on. But now we want to ask you a poll question. So on a scale of 1 to 7, 1 is not at all important, 7 is very important. How important is it to you that Utah has an integrated transportation system that includes roads, public transit, bike, and pedestrian trails? So we'll give you 30 or 40 seconds or so. think we have a very savvy group. You can only vote once. Got to make it count. Okay? Maybe a few more seconds. Okay, that's a pretty good read, and you'll be happy to know that based on a recent survey, and this was, Shane actually explained in his presentation today, so maybe a few of you cheated if you were listening to Shane, that every year UDOT does annual research, and we just concluded the phone survey that's scientifically valid, it's statewide, and so these results that you're going to see throughout the presentation today are what Utahns think. And as you can see, Utahns agree with you. They want to integrated transportation solutions. What Shane didn't talk about was that we also accompanied the phone survey with focus groups. And these focus groups help us get to the whys behind the numbers. And some of the statements that we heard from these focus groups, they weren't like, well, it just makes sense. They get it. They were saying things like, in 2040 or 50, when we have twice the amount of people, we need different options to still get around. And it's going to require options to keep our economy growing. And we can't build enough roads wide enough to handle double the amount of people we're expecting. So it's not just a cut and dried answer for them. They really are a little bit savvy about why they think integrated transportation needs to be a part of our future. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it back to Angela to talk about the 4 components we want to address today.
All right, you guys definitely know what's going on. That was cool watching. Who typed in Braceras? Okay, so interestingly enough, Carlos, by the words, he's saying it, he's using it, it's part of our, our emphasis area. In the planning world, many, many agencies are talking about it. They're not necessarily saying integrated transportation, but they're talking about the same thing. So many of the groups that I work with, Wasatch Front, MAG, Dixie, Cash, they all are talking about integrated transportation. I got a call from Centerville City Council today, and they're talking about integrated transportation. So yes, Carlos is saying it, but many others are as well. So communication and coordination is a huge part of integrated transportation. You can tell there's a lot of people involved. All those little pieces that you guys put together there, to accomplish all that, we need to talk a lot with a lot of different folks. We need to understand the whole system. I mean, we can't just understand the roadway system. We have to understand the PED system, the bike system, the freight system, the transit system. The whole system needs to work together, and we don't necessarily say UDOT has a complete street policy. Some people want us to. We don't have one. I don't think we'll ever have one. But what we want to discuss is a complete system. And so as part of a complete street, you want to accomplish a lot of things on that street. Well, with UDOT, we want to accomplish a lot of things in our system. We got to make sure that each of our areas can handle each mode. And a huge part of this is going to be promoting the use of the system. If we can do it right, Justin always tells us, no matter what we do, if we do it right, we still got to talk to people about it, educate people about it, and make them aware of the system and how you can use it. It's very important. I'm going to talk about a couple of programs now. Wasatch Front has a Transportation and Land Use Connection program, and we're involved from UDOT's end of it, and local government's involved, and they're basically looking at strategic type of master planning with their systems. And so we go out there and work with the local governments and try to make sure that everything, basically better transportation planning, making sure they're addressing all modes, making sure that they're thinking about the neighbor next door. Some people only plan for Centerville, but they don't plan for Bountiful. And so we're trying to connect it all. We just started working in Utah County with Mountain Land Association of Governments. We're gonna be working with a couple of different cities over there, Provo, Orem, American Fork? Lehigh? Okay. Okay, in Spanish Fork. So we're gonna start working with them, the same concepts going down. Utah County, in some facets, is ahead of the world with bicycle trails because Mountain Land Association of Governments has been doing a great job with it. But they're behind on the transit side of it, so we're gonna hopefully get them caught up on the transit side, work to connect wherever they need to connect to. So one of the ways that we're working with them is through, how many of you did Clear the Air Challenge in the summertime or the wintertime? Okay, so Utah County hasn't really participated too much yet, and so we're gonna work with them and try to do a challenge. We're working with their Chamber of Commerce right now, and we're gonna try to do a challenge with them in the winter. Okay, now we're gonna go back to polling again. Okay, I'm gonna ask you a question, and on a scale of 1 to 7, which 1 means likely and 7 means very likely, how likely are you to take public transit to avoid congestion? Excuse me? Go backward. Where's your backspace? Okay. Okay. Okay, it should be working now. Yes, it is. Okay, cool. Okay, I don't remember where's do we have the Utah Citizen one on that one?
Yes,
The next slide, okay, cool. Okay, you guys, I think, are pretty in line, I believe, with Utahns. Oh, you're way more likely, holy cow. Wow. I'm surprised, but I guess you guys are coming to the session, so you must be into it a little bit, but Utahns aren't. 33% say not very likely at all. And so part of it's where you live, of course, with transit. Part of it's where you live. Part of it's just their fear of not using transit. And so we're going to continue. If you guys remember last year, Carlos asked us, is our job to increase mass transit ridership? And so hopefully everyone thinks it is part of their job. And I know for us on our team in planning, we're really taking it to heart and trying to make a big effort to increase mass transit. Okay, and so on that same line, we started a first mile and last mile study. UTA set a goal to double their ridership in 2020. And a huge part of that is really improving the first and last mile of ridership, and that's a real problem with a lot of transit systems, but particularly with our transit system here, because it was built for cars. And so now we're saying, okay, you can get there in a car, but you can't get where you're going from because there's no car. So we got to make sure that you can take a bike or walk or car share or bike share, or build sidewalks, whatever we need to do. So this first and last mile study evaluated about 65 stations, and what we did is we made 6 topologies out of those stations, and we classified them in those groups. And now we're taking turns to actually, we're not taking turns, we're actually looking at each station and planning for what the future could be. So this top corner up here, my cane has value. That top corner up there, that's a graphic that we're going to, hopefully all of you guys are going to see in the next few years. And we're going to be working with local governments and everyone responsible for making first and last mile improvements work. An example of some of the solutions that are going to come out of this, I'm looking at the 1940 West first and last mile station, and in our study we have identified shoulder stripes on 1950 West need to happen, sidewalks on the west side of 1950 West. Create a cut through for path for bikes because there's a bike trail that can't access it. The current bus stop's a disaster, and we need to upgrade the current bus stop. And then we need to coordinate with the major office buildings in the area to make sure they have access to it. So each station, we're going to identify solutions to it, and then we're going to identify the appropriate partner to implement the solution. Sometimes it will be UDOT, sometimes it will be UTA, sometimes it will be a combination of both, sometimes it will be local governments. So hopefully you'll see a lot of first and last mile solutions to really help increase transit ridership. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Kim, and she's going to tell you about some of the workshops we've had.
So Angelo talked a lot about the partnerships that are necessary in order to make integrated transportation work. And some of the greatest successes that we've seen are holding a couple of workshops. First workshop we held was actually with UDOT, the UDOT regions 1 through 3 and UTA. And so this kind of adds to what Angelo is already doing on a project level, but it looks at it from both agencies and how can those agencies better collaborate. So what we started with was basically a presentation from both agency leaders, Carlos and Mike Allegra, talking about what their vision was. Then we had a conversation about what challenges are out there, what are some potential solutions. But to really dive deep into it, we actually gave case studies, and so broke the group up into various groups so they could actually look at a specific location and see what does it really look like when you start having these conversations. And what we asked for at the end was not only their solutions and what they came up with each of these sections, but also what are the ways that UDOT and UTA can work better together. So I'm just going to read some of those direct comments that we collected from them. Sorry, just reading my writing. So one of the biggest comments among multiple groups was it was great to be in the same room together, just have that face-to-face conversation. Build off past experiences of where they'd worked together and where the trust was there. Trust was a big thing that came up. Lay all cards on the table early, meaning when UDOT starts a concept phase, bring UTA to the table, not when you're in design and say, oh, by the way, do you have any bus stops? And vice versa, when UTA is actually looking at some of their changes in their system, bringing UDOT to the table and saying, this is what we're looking at. So it really is that early communication, collaboration. Work for the success of the project. So put all personalities, everything aside, and really look at the project and identify what is really necessary in order to make that project successful. Because if the project's successful, then everyone's successful. Think systematically, right thing at the right time. Need high level of concept collaboration to change. So basically, at a high level of both agencies really need to understand the collaboration in order to change that paradigm. Performance metrics for collaboration, and every group, I think, said the dialogue needs to continue. So not only did, I would say every group also talked about the dialogue needs to continue. We wanted to see between agencies how that could work better. So if UDOT's going out, bring UTA along to a meeting if it makes sense, if transit's related. The same thing, UTA has a transit program, but it's on a UDOT state route, bring UDOT along. So the idea was, the major comments were we need to get the MPOs at the table and the cities at the table. So start having more of this dialogue of looking at this on a high level, but bringing the other partners in to the conversation. We then had a workshop in Region 4, and with Region 4 it was a little different. We did actually invite the MPOs, the cities, 5 County, National Park Service, Southern Utah Bike Alliance, and UDOT. And some of the key messages from that, and again, it was the same format, broke it up into case studies, and every single group, collaboration is key. Having all of the parties at the table early on, it's amazing what you can come up with as far as resources are concerned, how you can share resources across the table, look beyond the corridor. That was another common theme. So really look at it systematically. I would say half the group said that we need to get out and experience. As designers, as engineers, as planners, we really need to experience what it's like to actually be on transit, be on a bike, walk a corridor. Be flexible in the scope definition and better communication across the board. So we hope to continue on with these workshops and more conversations about this just at a high level. So now I'm going to move into some active transportation questions and biking. So on a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is very low, what is UDOT's performance on building and maintaining bike and pedestrian trails? I think Shane may have given you a heads up on where the public was on this. So it looks like we've got some work to do. So going on to what the public thought, they thought we were doing okay, 5. So going back to what you guys were thinking, there's a lot of coordination that needs to be done. So we have one more. How accessible are bike lanes to you on a scale of 1 to 7? 1, not accessible, 7, very accessible. All right. Okay, and in comparison, so not great. Again, average of about 5. So people feel that there are some bike lanes that are accessible. But with this, hearing from the communities, working on the community level, there are a lot of conversations that say that whether or not it's bike lanes, people don't want to get on their bikes because it's not safe. They don't feel safe. Whether or not it's safe or not, they really just don't feel safe. So UDOT, in coordination with Department of Public Safety, has been working on the Road Respect program. We just celebrated our 5th year. And the focus of this program is to go out and talk to communities, and we have a community, Road Respect community program where you can move up through the ranks. So starting at the first level, going up to the peak level. And as you go, you can continue to improve your collaboration, and that means collaboration, just pulling people together who have an interest. One of the big partners on Road Respect in the last couple of years has been the health department. So the state health department has actually been issuing grants to communities to actually improve and become a level 1 Road Respect community. So they get approximately $3,000 to start identifying where are their gaps, who should they pull together, and what does this look like from a law enforcement standpoint. So with DPS, we also have a great partnership with UHP. And so we have riders that are on the road riding through these communities, celebrating what these communities have done once a year. But this whole program of the Road Respect program takes the entire year. We work with these communities, get them to this level, and then celebrate their success through the Road Respect Tour. So with that, there's no questions. I am going to turn this over to Justin.
I have a question.
Sure.
For the corridor, when I was in some of those meetings between UDOT and ETA, and I'm trying to remember, it was kind of an exercise, but do you feel like this is something that should happen prior to MPOs, or MPOs kind of put the lines on the map, and then that's when we really kind of see about issues with corridors?
Well, let me give you an example. Tooele was actually a case study that we looked at in that meeting. And so we were looking at Tooele Main Street. UDOT has a project on Tooele Main Street. There was a lot of coordination that went on between the project manager, even at that meeting, and it has continued on. We just had a meeting with Tooele City asking what they could do with active transportation. Representative from UTA was also in that meeting. They're striping approximately 5 lanes of bike lane off of Main Street in order to enhance the bike experience, because the city did not want to take parking off of Main Street. They wanted to keep the parking on Main Street, but there was an issue with where do you put the bikes. So now we've got a path all the way through the city and through that construction project, actually crossing Main Street, going down to the high school and connecting to an elementary school. So I think there's 2 levels. That was very much the project level and after the MPOs, but I do think looking at that paradigm shift, that probably needs to happen with the MPOs. And so that collaboration needs to happen early.
See that coming long before there was a project.
Yes, exactly. It was both.
Well, and I might add, also using Tooele as a good example of kind of where the MPOs out there, it's an RPO, but the RPO is at the table in a process that's been collaborative with a workshop that was done out in Tooele, where Representatives from WFRC were in the room. We had the county. We had the major cities in the major valley in Tooele County. And they were talking about integrated transportation solutions. And so I would say that that's a higher level maybe that you're talking about, with the MPOs there at the table along with all the other entities talking about what the future looks like. And so WFRC has supported the county in doing a transportation study that's going to build in some of those lines on the map for the future that then turn into projects. So with that said, we want to kind of shift gears now toward, Angela mentioned this earlier, we've talked so far about bringing the entities in our industry together to understand what each other does, to talk about the need for integrated transportation solutions, and then to start figuring out how to actually build them in the case of the Tooele that Kim just mentioned. But there's this piece of the public that is pretty important. And Angelo said that I often am saying, you know, we could build all the great infrastructure, integrated infrastructure in the world, but if nobody is of a mind to use it, it was all for naught. And so there's a behavior change piece to integrated transportation that TravelWise in large part tries to tackle. And so in this year's survey, we had a number of questions, the UDOT annual survey, that focused on the public's sense of integrated transportation use and behaviors. And so we asked people, are they actually changing their travel behavior to try to reduce their time in congestion? You're saying definitely. That's 75% probably, or definitely. And you're pretty well in line with the public. We asked them also about factors such as the cost of gas. Or are you making changes based on air quality and that sort of thing? And so they don't rate quite as well or quite as high as people saying, I'm just trying to get out of congestion as much as I can. So that's why I changed my behavior. So like I said, TravelWise has a big component in this. Obviously, a lot of what we've talked about, the TravelWise team has been engaged in as well. But trying to get the public to think differently about how they make their trips. And so the behavior change component is important because, to give you an example, the Point project was starting, the project development started a couple years ago, and we started working with the Point project team on how TravelWise could be a part of the traffic management, basically. Pete Marshall is kind of the lead traffic guy on the project, and he came to the team and said, you know, this is really a PI project in terms of MOT. If we can't get people not to drive out there at peak times, we're in big, big trouble. Because even though the department required the contractor to maintain the same number of lanes that they've had, the lanes would be narrowed. You put the truck climbing lane went away, so you put the trucks over in the main flow of traffic, and everything slows down. And anybody that's driven through there in the last year, I'm seeing lots of nodding heads. You get what you've got for the last year. But Pete and Tim Rose, the project director, they said, you know, we think if we can get between 15 to 20% reduction in travel through that corridor at peak times, we'll actually be able to keep people moving. It won't be at those same speeds they're used to, but it'll make a big, big difference. And so between, the department asked us to kind of come up with a little mini campaign, if you will, to try to get people to think about how they're gonna make that trip and consider other options. And so we launched something we called Rethink Your Commute. And maybe you've seen the billboards, maybe you've heard a radio spot, seen something on your social media about Rethink Your Commute, but it was all about using TravelWise strategies to change the way they traveled through that corridor. So we invited people to start or leave earlier or later, hop on the train instead, carpool, or telecommute. So a couple of those get you out of the traffic entirely and make your time more productive, and others hopefully speed up your trip. And so what we've seen in the southbound direction, average reduction of traffic volume of 17%. So obviously that's not just the campaign, but the campaign did put out a reminder to people that, hey, you don't have to just sit here in traffic every single day. There are other options. So between the pain that people felt, the messages they were hearing, and then their willingness to make a change, we've seen a traffic reduction. And it varies by direction and time of day, but overall, people are making a different choice to get through that traffic, and it's been very successful. So in terms of that invitation, Rethink Your Commute, and the TravelWise program, we've been working with Angelo and Joe Walker, the communications director, to talk about how we can merge those two a little more closely. And so we've kind of rebranded TravelWise with a little more direct invitation. So we're basically going to start asking the public, rethink your trip. Not just at commute time, all the time. If you can get there on a bike instead of getting in your car, ride your bike. If you can hop on the train or hop on the bus and save that or be productive during the time that you're trying to get to just the store or get to work or whatever, do that. But we're not dictating to people what they ought to do. We're just giving them an invitation. Think about it. That's all we want them to do. And so Rethink Your Trip is going to be something you'll hear a little more and more as we go on. But we find that construction projects are a great opportunity when people are really feeling the pain to invite them to think about how they could do something differently. So I want to just hit you with a couple more poll questions, and these are tied to those specific TravelWise actions. So we asked the public, 1 being not at all likely, 7 being very likely, how likely are you to shift travel times? Meaning start, leave earlier or later to avoid that peak time traffic, to avoid congestion. So what do you think? Some people just gotta be there when they gotta be there. Okay. Well, you're pretty close with the general public. But you can see that of all the TravelWise strategies, there's 2 that stick out as people being most willing to do. There's trip chaining, which is if you got to go out, do all your errands at once rather than go out, come back, go out, come back, go out, come back. People do that pretty much all the time without even thinking about it. This is the other one. People recognize that if they can start a little bit ahead of the commute or a little bit behind the commute, they're going to be a lot better off. And that's kind of that curve as we worked with the TOC on the point. That curve has spread out. In fact, we even put on the VMS board to really remind people if you thank you. It's really handy having you guys here the whole session this time. Thank you. So anyway, we put, you may have seen these on the VMS boards saying that if you'd have left at 4 o'clock, this would have been your travel time versus now this is your travel time. So showing people what that delay change would be based on the time of day they traveled. Next question ties to carpooling. How likely are you to carpool? 1 being not very, 7 being very. Got the top and the bottom so far. Okay? This is really fun to watch, by the way. This is really the reason we threw this in. This should be fun. No, I'm kidding. So, yeah. And I'm going to tell you, you track pretty well with the general public. Mostly, people are not, it's just, I have to ask somebody if I can ride with them. That's dangerous. That's scary. I can't talk to other people. But so carpooling is something that maybe as we continue to communicate about TravelWise actions, we'll probably emphasize some of these that the public's already more willing to do, but we're not going to forget these others. Particularly, it depends on our audience. As we go in and work with businesses, for example, one of the things that often people don't realize is that they already have people they could carpool with. Oh, you live in my neighborhood? I didn't know that. So sometimes it's different by audience, what we communicate about, but anyway, TravelWise is a big piece of the behavior change side, the public-facing side of integrated transportation. So we've talked a little bit about all the different puzzle pieces and how they work together. Caitlin's now going to kind of be our cleanup batter and talk about how some of these things are actually coming together and being implemented on the ground right now. So I'm going to turn it to Caitlin.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Cleanup batter is probably a little optimistic, but we'll go with it. So I just want to talk to you guys briefly about a couple of projects that we think really exemplify that concept of integrated transportation. The first one is Mountain View Corridor. This is a planned freeway, transit, and trail system on the western side of Salt Lake County. And so the roadway component of this is a freeway that will connect I-80 in the north to I-15 down by Lehigh in the south. And so that'll provide a lot more capacity on that western side of the valley. The transit component, you can see on the map on the right side of the screen, the hot pink line is a planned high-capacity transit for 5600 West, and that's going to connect that airport tracks line down to the transit down at Daybreak. So again, that's really going to improve the capacity along that side of the valley. In terms of active transportation, where there's frontage roads, they've striped bike lanes, you can see in that top photo. And then in the areas where it's going to be a freeway, obviously you're not going to have bikes there, so they've pushed off to the side and they have a paved multi-use pathway. And so that covers the active transportation component. And so again, this is a system that exemplifies, regardless of which mode you're choosing to use, you can move safely and efficiently through the system. So it's covering all users. The other area we wanted to look at is down in southern Utah in St. George. There's been quite a bit of work along Bluff Street. In particular, at the Red Hills Parkway interchange, they've done some work to improve traffic flow and reduce wait times and congestion there, also improving safety. As part of that, they put in some underpasses so that bikes and pedestrians who are using the multi-use pathway avoid those potential conflicts with vehicles. So again, it's increasing not only the mobility, but also the safety for all of those users. The lower image there on the right, as well, St. George is also trying to identify intersections where they can add bicycle radar detection so that when cyclists are moving through that intersection, they can trip that green signal and move safely. And what they're doing there in the photo is spray painting on the pavement the small logo to indicate to the biker where they need to stop to be able to be captured by that radar and get the green light. And then just kind of finally, we wanted to tell you guys about a tool that we've put together. As Carlos mentioned in the welcoming address yesterday, story maps are kind of the new big thing that we're excited about. And so we've put together an integrated transportation story map. And the intention of this is, a self-guided learning tool that the user can step through on their own. And it's got a lot of multimedia content. We have videos, text, photos, all sorts of things. Angelo spoke to the first and last mile study. We have that full report included as a PDF. So we've got a bunch of different content on there, and it captures all the different things we've covered today, from collaboration with community partners to different example projects to, again, some of the studies that specifically speak to some of these different integrated transportation components. So that's a tool we're really excited about. To access that, you go to UPlan, which I think the URL is uplan.arcgis.maps.com. But in the upper right-hand corner, there's a search bar. So just type in integrated transportation, and that'll pop up the results list here. Integrated transportation in Utah is the StoryMap app, and just click on that. And again, it's totally self-guided, so you can kind of go through it at your own pace, but it's got all the information that we've covered here today. So we're really excited about that tool. And now the true cleanup batter is Angelo.
That would be like fifth, I think, so. Anyway, we got a few minutes left, and I want to touch on two things that I forgot to mention. One is reliability. It's very important as a performance measure, and I don't know if any of you heard our strategic direction session on optimized mobility today. Reliability is something that UTA thrives on with the transit system, and we are going to be looking at for UDOT to measure reliability. And so part of that will be our traditional looking at the road system and making sure that system's reliable. And then we really have to figure out how we're going to look at our integrated system and make sure that's reliable. So it's not just important that the freeways work, but it's important that the arterials work in connection with the transit system and the bike system, okay? The other thing I wanted to mention was we are in planning, because UDOT's emphasizing integrated transportation. We're putting together a strategic direction on integrated transportation, and I would like to challenge all the UDOT people on your focus area to think about that and how that applies to your job, and you don't have to put together a strategic direction, but just think about it with your team and you as an individual and how that applies, okay? The basics again, you guys covered it early. I think you hit a home run, honestly, with your little exercise, a word exercise that we did. And so I think everyone in the room gets it. Now we got to get the rest of UDOT and the rest of the local governments and the rest of UTA and the rest of Wasatch Front and MAG to really appreciate and embrace integrated transportation system. So with that, I open it up to questions for the group and for any of us. It's time to go home? That's cool. Okay, thank you very much, you guys.